Hi, I'm Charlotte Reeves from Unleashed Education, and you've tuned in to another episode of Edit My Photo. It's no secret that I have a soft spot for Australian Shepherds, so as soon as I saw this image, I was immediately drawn to it. The dog looks amazing posed on the tree stump, but the location and the lighting mean it doesn't stand out as well as it could. In this edit, I'll be simplifying the image by removing distractions and balancing the light. To help with that, I'll be adding no less than 8 masks in Lightroom. We'll also talk about how to address blown out highlights, how we can improve the composition and the crop. Feel free to follow along from start to finish, or you can fast track through the edit using the timecodes below. As always, I welcome your questions and feedback in the comments. If you like the video, please subscribe for more pet photography, shooting and editing tips and tricks. So I'm actually really excited about this edit because it's a lovely photo to start with, and of course it has an Aussie Shepherd in it, and you know, I may be a little bit biased because I've got 3 of them myself, so I'm really excited to dive into this one. So it's been shot quite nicely. It is backlit, a little bit side lit. There is quite heavy light sort of coming in from the left here. And we do have a little bit of an area of sort of blown out fur here. I don't think we're going to be able to fully recover that. We can actually tell just by taking the exposure all the way down to see if there is actually any detail in there. There are some parts where there is basically no detail in there. So we're not going to be able to completely recover that, but we are going to be able to draw attention to other parts of the image to take attention away from that blown out area. And I'll show you how I'm going to do that. So first up, we're just going to do some global edits. Now, it's been shot with a Nikon D610 and it's coming with the camera profile camera standard. So I have a feeling that it might actually be a little bit nicer using one of the Adobe profiles. I do find the Adobe profiles are a nicer starting point for Nikon files for some reason. So I might actually just change that to Adobe standard. I feel that that takes away that weird greenish cast that you can sometimes get with the Nikon camera matching profiles. So let's choose Adobe standard as the starting point. So I feel like the white balance isn't too bad. There's some warm light coming through from the background though, so we do kind of want to accentuate that. So I'm just going to take the white balance up just a little bit to a slightly warmer temperature and also just add a little touch of magenta. So we're also going to take the highlights down, take the shadows up to get a bit more detail in the shadows, and possibly take the whites up. I'm just going to press J on the keyboard to kind of keep an eye on those highlight areas to make sure we're not going to be blowing them out too much. See if I take that white slider up, it's really having an effect on those areas. So we don't want to take that up too far. Probably take the blacks down a little bit to help preserve contrast. Again, we don't want to take the blacks down too far because then you end up blocking up areas of black fur, and we don't want to do that either. So there is quite a lot of contrast in this image that we need to think about. I'll just turn the clipping alerts off again. So overall, we are going to add a little bit of clarity, a little bit of vibrance. And I think most of the rest of the edit I'm actually going to achieve with masks. So let's dive into the masking. This is the fun part. I really enjoy this part. So first up, because of the really strong light from behind and the strong light on the background, we do need to make the dog stand out more. Now, if I were to just select the dog and brighten it up, it would look kind of weird because the dog is standing on the stump, and if we left the stump the way it was and brightened the dog up, the dog would end up with a real cardboard cutout kind of look, and we don't want that. So we're going to do a subject selection. That will select the dog quite nicely. And then I want to select the stump. So the quickest way to do that is to add with an object selection. I'm just going to put it in marquee mode here and then just basically draw around the stump. Now Lightroom has done a pretty good job of selecting the stump there as well. I also want to just add this little shadowed area on the shaded side of the stump. So let's just go add with a brush and make sure it's not on auto mask, and I'm just going to kind of manually brush in these areas here as well, being careful not to go into the sunlit areas. So I think that's pretty good there. So before I start making adjustments, I'm just going to turn that overlay off by pressing O on the keyboard. And now I'm just going to add a little bit of light to this area. So a little bit of exposure, a little bit in the shadows. Take the whites up a touch and the blacks down a little to add contrast. So I think this is looking quite good. So let me just turn that off and on. Yep, that's helped to brighten up that sort of shadowed side of the dog and the stump. So we've got a little bit of a problem in that in taking the whites up on that adjustment, it's actually sort of included this blown out area. So I'm going to go back into this mask and subtract with a brush. I'll just press O on the keyboard so I can see that overlay again. And then I'm just going to subtract this blown out area because I don't want to be taking the highlights any brighter in these areas. So also here and also just on the back of the neck here. All right, so let me just turn that overlay off again. And let's just turn that mask off and on. Okay, great. I think we're ready for the next mask. So I'd like to accentuate the warm light in the background. So I'm going to create a radial gradient. So Shift M on the keyboard is the keyboard shortcut from that. Now there's light sort of coming in on the left-hand side. It's not quite reaching over onto the right-hand side. So I'm just going to sort of limit it to this kind of area. So it's in keeping with what the light is actually doing in the image. I don't want to create light where there is none. So I'll subtract the subject. And it's also kind of coming over onto this stump as well. So I'll also subtract object and just draw around that stump again. O to turn the overlay off. And then I'm just going to add a little bit of haze and a little bit of warmth into that background, maybe a touch of magenta as well. Now, there's some really, really bright greens in this, and I'm not a green hater. I don't hate greens, but I think we probably need to just tone them down a little bit. So I'm going to do a color range selection, and I'm just going to click the eyedropper onto this really bright green that we've got. And as you can see, it's chosen all of the tones in the image that are very, very similar to that. So I'll press O on the keyboard and I'm going to counteract the green by adding magenta. I'm going to add some magenta here, maybe just take that refine up a little bit so it covers more of a wider range of colors. I'm going to take the saturation down a little and also just take the whites down a little to take the edge off how bright they are. So there were very subtle changes there. So let me just turn that off and on again. If you look at those greens, it's just sort of toned them down without completely getting rid of them. I think that's probably all we need to do. Now we are going to crop this image. Elephant in the room is the crop and the composition isn't working really great at the moment. So I will be chopping off the left-hand side of the image, but I'm not going to do that until the very last step. I like to leave cropping right to the very end so you're not throwing away the edges of the image that you might need later if you're doing, say, a gallery wrapped canvas or something like that. So what I'm going to do is add a vignette based on the dog's position in the image rather than just darkening all the way around the edges of the existing crop. So let's just go Shift M, new radial gradient. I'm going to center this kind of around the front of the dog and then invert it. And then we're going to take the contrast and the exposure down and see how that's really made the dog stand out a lot more. Now I'm kind of darkening that top left area that I lightened before, so I'm also going to subtract with a very large brush at a slightly lower density just in that corner there, because I don't want to darken that too much because that would not be in keeping with the actual light. So I'm going to do a little temporary crop right now, just so I can get an idea of how the light is going in the image. So let's just do a temporary crop. So it's probably going to be something like this. Because the dog is facing very strongly to the right of the image, we definitely need to have more negative space over here than in behind the dog. So it's going to be something like this. Now I'm going to uncrop this again before I export it. So I think we probably need to add a little bit more darkening kind of in this left bottom corner. So let's just add a linear gradient. It's going to kind of come up from here, and then another linear gradient. So option M up from the bottom to sort of darken that bottom part off as well. I want the keyboard to turn that off, and then let's take the contrast and exposure down. And that's really acting as a stopper along the bottom and the left side of the image that's going to throw our attention back to the dog's face. Now, speaking of the dog, let's see if we can enhance the look of the dog a little bit more. So let's do another subject selection. I really want that beautiful white fur on the chest to stand out. So let's intersect that. So if I hold down Option on the keyboard, we get a little secret button pop up here called intersect. So we click intersect, and we want to intersect it with a radial gradient that I'm going to pull out from here. That's going to just cover the sort of the front of the dog there. Just that kind of area there. Okay, overlay off. And this time we're going to add some whites. Take the exposure up just a little bit, and then also take the blacks down to add contrast. I also think I might just add a bit of extra texture. That will help to bring out the detail in the eyes and the face and the markings, and just a little touch of clarity as well. I really want to emphasize this area at the front here, to take attention away from the blown out back end, of course. Overall, I think we could get away with adding even more texture just to the dog. So let's add another subject selection. We're getting a lot of masks happening here. And then this time I'm just going to take up texture overall on the dog. Okay, so I'm thinking the background still looks a little bit green in parts. I'd really like to give it more of a kind of an autumny sort of fall feel. There are a few little touches of those colors in there. So again, I'm going to go for a color range selection. I'm going to click this green in the background. Let's just have a look and see how much of the image that's selected. Selected quite a lot of the image, which I think I kind of want, but I definitely need to subtract the subject. All right, let's give that a go. All right, overlay off. And again, I'm going to counteract the green with magenta, which is the opposite. Possibly warm it up a touch. And let's just have a little play with the hue here. Now, if I take hue to the left, it will start introducing, we don't want to take it too far because things go purple, but we want to take it a little bit to the left, just to start bringing in some of those warmer orangey kind of tones, especially in this area here. That's working quite nicely. I'm just going to go in and actually tweak this background glow because I think we can bring that out a little bit more. So that is this mask here. I love the fact that you can go in and fiddle with these masks constantly. Okay. So before we take this into Photoshop, let's do a quick little before and after check. So this is the raw file. So you can see how much the subject doesn't really stand out here because it's so shadowy and everything else is so bright. We've worked really hard to make the subject the star of the show and have everything else kind of just fading into the background. We've also done quite a lot with masks. So let's just turn those masks off and on. So we've really painted with light, again, to increase interest and contrast and detail in the subject and to decrease all of those things in the rest of the image. Okay, so I've just uncropped this as well. So let's take this into Photoshop and start doing a little bit of cleaning up. That's also going to really help draw attention to the subject. So there's quite a lot of cleaning up that needs to happen with this image. There's all of these little bright highlights in the background. There's, you know, this sort of thing underneath the dog. There's lots of sticks and things like that. So I'm going to go around and do a bit of a cleanup. So I'm mostly going to be using the patch tool, both as the patch tool, so using it to sample content from other areas, but also just as a selection tool to do a content aware fill. I'll also be using the spot healing brush tool, the clone stamp tool, and probably a few different selection techniques and content aware fill to greatly simplify the image. That will really help to draw attention to the subject. I'm going to dive into that right now. I'll turn it into a speed edit. I'll see you on the other side. Right, so that was a fair bit of cleaning up. Let's just have a quick look right back to the start of how it looked when we brought it into Photoshop and compare that to now. So quite a bit of work, but I really think that it helps to make the background look not quite as distracting. So talking about the dog, I think we could probably just brighten up this white a little bit more. Just a couple of little pieces I missed on the dog here. Okay, so I'm going to use the dodge tool set to very light exposure in the midtones and just kind of run that along these white areas of the dog's coat. That will also kind of help the blown out bits on the edge sort of blend into the general whiteness of the coat. It's a good way of disguising blown out areas. So we can sort of do that here as well. Just add a little bit of lightness along the edge here, and it feels like more of a transition to the blown out areas rather than a sharp kind of instant thing. The focus is actually quite good in this image. It does look like the eyes and the face and everything is nicely focused. However, I think we could probably add just a little bit of extra sharpness. So I'm going to duplicate the background layer, which is what I always do before adding a Topaz filter. So we're going to go Topaz Sharpen. And the last one that I use is out of focus, very blurry. That's a pretty strong sharpening effect, but I do actually quite like it. I just need to make sure we need to brush it off the background because it does weird things to the background that we definitely don't want. That's why we did it on a separate layer. So I think it makes the dog look quite good. I'm going to go apply. So now here back in Photoshop, if I turn that layer off and on, you'll see what an amazing sharpening effect that filter has. It's really, really good. Now, we don't want to apply this to the whole image. We only really want to apply it to the dog. So I'm going to do a subject selection. So select subject, and that subject selection looks pretty good. So I'm then going to use that selection to make a mask. So if I just click the new mask icon, it will actually mask out the whole rest of the image and only apply that sharpening layer to the dog, which is perfect. Now, even still, we don't want it at 100% either. So we also need to take the opacity of that layer down. So let's go to about 53. Okay, I think that looks good. I'm going to flatten that. So I think that looks really quite lovely. I'm going to take this back into Lightroom now and we shall have a chat about the crop. Okay, so here we have the image in Lightroom. Now, the reason I didn't crop it before is because I think this image, you could probably go two ways with the crop. You could go a standard 2:3 crop and just basically crop it in more from the left, still with the bottom of the stump in, because I think that's important. So probably cropping in quite a lot off the left-hand side. So you could go for something like this. Or I also think this image would look nice as a square crop. Now I don't often do square crop, but some images just suit it. So let's go 1:1. And this is why it was important not to crop off the top of the image, because we need that when we do a square crop. So I'm thinking about there for a square crop. We could even actually come in a little bit more, just so we're getting rid of that little stick there. Probably could get rid of that stick, but it doesn't bother me too much. So maybe something like this. Yes. So I think this as a square crop would also work really nicely. So we're all done. On the way out, we're going to take a quick look at the before and afters. I hope you've enjoyed this edit. Hopefully you've learnt a few new things in Lightroom or Photoshop or both, and I'll see you next time.